Hey y'all, it's Nancy, the Handy Scandy. Welcome back for another crafty venture. Today we are going to take a background that has just been in my stash. It was going unloved, and we're going to give it some life by using some simple die cutting and some heat embossing techniques. Y'all know I love me some heat embossing. I am taking this background, which you can see there on my die cutting machine, and I just ran it through with the dies. These dies are from Hero Arts. I will have everything listed and linked downstairs. The background stamp that I put across the ink blended background was from Pinkfresh Studio, and again I'll have everything listed downstairs. This die that I'm running through now, this frame die, is also from Pinkfresh, and I pretty much am die cutting all the elements out twice. So I'm going to stack up two of those frames. I'm going to use two of these foliage pieces. This foliage die is from Penny Black. The sentiment says "You Are Enough," and that's from Simon. Simon Says Stamp, and I cut out, like I said, two of each. Now I am about to layer up the shadow portion of my sentiment because I just don't have the stamina anymore to stack up sentiment dies. I just don't. The backgrounds, the shadows, absolutely. That's how I'll get my dimension, but the words, no. Now I'm about to stack up these frames as well. Super simple. Just had to make sure that all those little bits and pieces were punched out. And then you can see that my foliage piece there is in bits and pieces. That's because I struggle a little bit with the Magic Mat. I don't know everyone else's opinion. It's great, but it's super soft, and so sometimes I have to run things through literally 3 and 4 times. You can see that this one came out perfectly, but I ran it through about 4 times to get a good die cut. One thing that I love about this particular foliage die, as I'm auditioning all of my pieces, I love the way that cut out from the background of that cardstock, because now essentially I can use it as a stencil. Did you notice that? Pause for a second and go back and look at that leftover piece, because it really can be a stencil. So anyway, back to my process. This is where all of that heat embossing comes in. So I already did the heat embossing with the stamped image on the ink blended background. And now I am just pushing all of my elements into my Versamark pad. And please don't judge me. It's hideous. It's very, very dirty. In fact, I have 3 embossing pads and they all look like that. But they have plenty of ink. So it is what it is. So tap it all down into the ink pad. Get it nice and sticky. Put the embossing powder on. This is Gilded from Brutus Monroe. And I just do 1 layer and it's just stunning. Now you can do these heat embossing techniques with any color of heat embossing. Clear obviously isn't going to do a whole lot unless you're using a colored cardstock or maybe a pattern paper, something like that. But now I also do the "You Are Enough." I'm doing the sentiment itself, and when you do this, not only does it give it some color and some interest and all of those things, but it also gives it a little more texture and a little bit more stability. And then I take my panel that already has the ink blending and it already has that beautiful stamped and embossed background, but I want to go around the edges. I like that elegant grungy look that this creates. So I go all around the edges with the Versamark, and then I go around the edges with the embossing powder and I heat emboss that. And then I like my corners to be even more grungy. But grungy elegant, right? So I use the gold embossing powder and I just tap it down into, or I tap the cardstock while it's still hot down into the powder, and then it adheres, and then I heat that up again. Now here, guys, this is my favorite part, I have to say. I have the new vintage, I think it's a 6x6 red rubber background stamp from Whimsy, and it's beautiful. And I just use it and I just kind of put it in the ink and roll it around on the card, and it creates this beautiful extra texture and this beautiful pattern, and it just really, really is, in my opinion, the finishing touch on this background. So again, in the Versamark and then the embossing powder, and look at that gorgeousness. So I'm holding it up in the light, just making sure that there are no dull and grainy areas on the embossing powder, and then I hit it with the heat tool if there is. So again, kind of auditioning all my pieces, making sure that as all the elements come together that I'm still liking the idea that I have in my head. And I'm just trying to figure out if I want the sentiment to be back behind the frame or in front of it. And so now it's time to bring all of this beautiful gilding to the frame as well. So same process, put it in the ink, lay it down, put the embossing powder on it, heat it, heat it, heat it. And then I have a little piece of paper that was stuck on it that I was getting it off with my picky tool. So I'm heating up those ends and dipping it back in the powder and then heating it again, because I just wanted them to have a little more presence, a little more prominence, almost so that those ends feel more like a I don't know, like a carved element, if that makes any sense. When you think of like an ornate wooden frame or a resin frame, how some areas are a little more thicker and have more prominence. That's how I wanted the ends on that card to be. So just stuck them in the embossing powder, literally just stuck them in there while it was still wet. Stick it in the powder, and the dry powder adheres to the heat, the hot and melty embossing powder that's on the frame. And then I just heat it again. So here you can see all of that beautiful scripty background. You can see the grungy elegance. You can see the frame that's embossed around the edges. You can see obviously the embossing on the stamped image, and even the water droplets, which you can see even from afar. But so much going on that background that was just stuck in my stash. It was just sitting there going unused, unloved, and it didn't take much to bring it to life. And now I'm adding all of my additional elements to just kind of finish off the card. So there is the frame laid down, and here I have the sentiment, "You are enough." I chose to leave the frame or the shadow in white. I just felt like it needed the white to have the gold pop off, if that makes any sense. So here I am kind of doing double duty, holding everything down with my left hand, adding glue to this foliage piece with my right, and then just allowing the frame of the foliage piece to follow the frame of the frame, the outline of the frame, the shape of the frame. And I love the gold on gold, but I decided that I also wanted to use those leftover bits that came apart in my first attempt at die cutting. So I am just kind of sliding them in there, layering them in different areas, and using the fact that this came apart to my benefit and to the benefit of the card. And the fact that it adds a little more white to the card, it makes that white shadow layer of the sentiment make sense. So now I have these two foliagey bits, and then I add the third piece because it came apart in three bits, and I just kind of snip off any excess. I tuck and I kind of layer where I want it to be tucked and layered, and here it is. And I love it. I really feel like the die cutting and the heat embossing were key to bring this. I mean, you could have used any kind of colors that you wanted, any design that you wanted, but those techniques are timeless, and they can bring any background stash, regardless of what it looks like. You can bring it to life. So just keep those things in mind. I think sometimes we get busy with other tips and techniques and things that we forget the simple ink blending and the simple die cutting and heat embossing, and they are timeless, they are classic, and this is why. Look at that beautiful card. So guys, this is Nancy, the Handy Scandy. I thank you for spending some time with me today as we create this beautiful card. If you found this video interesting, inspiring, educational, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button, and don't forget to ring that bell so that you are alerted every time I post a new video. And I thank you guys so much from the bottom of my heart. You are the best, and I will see you in the next video. Until then, mwah, I'm out.